Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Collaborating to Support Educational Research. We ask that you please place yourself on mute once you have your audio connected and use the Q&A feature to ask any questions you have. If you need to use the closed captioning feature, the link, code, and password are provided in the Q&A box. We will devote time at the end of today's webinar to answer as many questions as possible. I would like to remind you this webinar is being recorded and will be made available at a later date. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Gosa.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Before we start, I would ask the presenters to all go ahead and mute yourselves. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, so then you can unmute when it's time for you to speak. As Amanda indicated, my name is Kathy Gosa, and I'm with the SLDS State Support Team. In collaboration with our partners at the American Education Research Association, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar regarding collaboration to support education research. First up today, we'll hear some opening remarks from Felice Levine with AERA and then Nancy Sharkey with the SLDS program. We'll then move right into the heart of today's session, starting with Jessica Cunningham at the Kentucky Center for Statistics and their research partners at the University of Kentucky, Gina Toma and Rajiv Darolia. Next up will be Kevin Schaaf with the Tennessee Department of Ed and their research partner, Matt Ronfeld with the University of Michigan. And finally, we'll hear from Carl Fredrik with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction and their research partner from the University of Wisconsin, Eric Godsky. We've reserved some time at the end of this discussion to respond to questions you have, as Amanda indicated. So please be sure to enter those into the Q&A panel throughout the presentation. One thing that we do want to note, if we have more questions than we have time to respond to, we will provide written responses to any questions that are remaining. So go ahead and enter your questions throughout. Once the Q&A session is over, we'll wrap up and I'll share some important links and contact information. So now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Felice Levine.
Thank you very much. This is indeed a thrill and a pleasure for AERA to be able to collaborate with the Statewide Longitudinal Data Systems program and the Institute of Education Sciences. I can think of no more important opportunity than to do so with a focus on statewide longitudinal data systems and to bring together the research community in the SLDS program focused on those opportunities to advance fundamental scientific knowledge and also evidence-based decision making. For those of you less familiar with the SLDS program and those data systems, they are a national treasure. They know no peer across any other social institution, society, for the investment that has been made in the development of high-quality data systems appropriate for analytic work, both to drive knowledge and to drive evidence-based policy making. So I am really thrilled and honored to be a party to this event. This is really our second collaboration with IES over the last month. The first was a seminar we held on June 11th when IES announced and put forth the elements of how to think about a competition in which the state education agencies have an opportunity to research on their data systems on important evidence-based policy questions that drive their interest, and to do so also by reaching out to the research community. So this is a very important follow-up to that event. But this also has sustained and enduring value in not having that kind of target date of July 30th, as important as it is. But this webinar is very much oriented to show the existence proofs across three marvelous opportunities of how state The statewide longitudinal data systems in Kentucky, Wisconsin, and Tennessee are actively engaged in doing significant work with the research community. And we hope all of you viewing and hearing this today will take that to heart as a pathway for doing important work that matters and for doing so in the context of your agendas of research and your interests. And with that kind of broad introductory and heartfelt statement and opening statement, I wish indeed I could do these days a site visit to Kentucky, Wisconsin, and Tennessee, but this is going to be as good as it gets. And I would like to now turn this over to my partner and collaborator, Nancy Sharkey, who is Senior Program Officer at the National Center for Education Statistics, and who no one who knows better than the SLDS data systems to provide the framing for this webinar. Okay.
Well, thanks, Felice, for that really wonderful start to the webinar. Thanks, Kathy, also for kicking us off. I'm going to ask, just as a housekeeping thing, if folks are not on mute, could you please mute yourself just so that everyone can get the most possible out of this webinar? We'd appreciate that. So thank you. I'm Nancy Sharkey, as Felice said. For those of you who don't know me, I am both a Senior Program Officer on the SLDS program at NCS, but I've also worked as a researcher doing some of the types of policy research that we're hoping to support. And I also worked on the state side of an SLDS project. So I feel like this grant opportunity is sort of the intersection of everything I hold dear. So I'm thrilled that we could talk a little bit about it today. As you might know, the SLDS program has been making grants since 2006, and we've made awards to almost all states and territories. If you're on the phone and you don't know what's happened in your state, if you've gotten a grant, I strongly encourage you to go to our website. We have maps that you can see if your state's been awarded a grant, how much money, what the focus was. So there's a wealth of information there. Our grants have included everything from technical infrastructure and data linking and data governance to a variety of data uses, including things like dashboards and early warning systems and ways for teachers to make better sense of data. We also have supported research and policy analysis and evaluation. Most of those projects got kicked off with our 2015 grant round. I am thrilled that states and researchers have this new IES grant opportunity to continue that work and to strengthen collaborations with the goal of supporting education research. And I'm grateful to today's state and state research partner presenters who will share a taste of what it takes to establish and sustain, hopefully, mutually beneficial and true partnerships around doing this work to improve policy and practice. I want to also thank everyone attending today. I know there are a lot of you out there, from state teams to our federal coworkers, to our AERA partners, colleagues, to the presenters. The size of this audience speaks to the appetite for this type of work and the sharing of this type of best practice from states. The size probably also does not reflect a desire to hear me speak anymore. So I will turn this over to the team from the great state of Kentucky so they can kick off sharing their experiences with us. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be here to talk about our great partnership with the University of Kentucky and the Martin School with my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Toma and Dr. Duralia. I am the Executive Director at the Kentucky Center for Statistics, otherwise known as KY Stats. We house the Kentucky Longitudinal Data System and the Labor Market Information Office. We have been very fortunate to receive IES funding over the years to develop a very robust longitudinal data system. I put this slide in here to give you an idea of all of the data that's included in our SLDS. And so as you can see, based on the robustness of this data, it would be near to impossible to have the research capacity in-house to be able to answer all of the important questions out of a data system like this, hence the reason for our great partnerships with our universities like the University of Kentucky. I want to tell you a little bit about our governing board, just to give you an idea that they are actually the people who guide our research agenda, which we revisit every 2 years, and that's important because it's all of the research that comes out of our office. So when we partner with research universities, we align that to our research agenda. Also, they have designees that will look at the data requests, the individual level de-identified data requests out of our office, to review them and look at the research questions and things like that. Over the years, this process has evolved, especially with our partners that are on the phone. So I look forward to letting them tell you about how that process and partnership has evolved over time. This is our research agenda, so as you can see, everything that we have listed, it is pretty easy to think of the research questions that are possible from an education standpoint, and you can likely align them to any of these 4 categories. But what I tell everyone whenever we present about the research that we do out of our office, we write the results section, but we do not write the discussion section. So therefore, we lean on our partnering agencies and our partners at research universities to kind of write that discussion and implication section. And with that being said, I will hand it off to Dr. Toma to talk about the evolution of our research partnership over time.
Yes, one of the advantages of being around a very long time is that you really do remember personally how this all began. And so I've been involved in our research partnership since before it began. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we did. So in Kentucky, lots of people know that we were one of the forerunners of collecting data as part of our, we're obviously a bit famous for this, for the Kentucky Education Reform Act. And so we began collecting data as early as 1990. But it was very much at the school level data and everything was public. So it was only when the data started moving to include private confidential things that we had to start thinking about how we would have our partnership. And for me as a researcher, I was very, very fortunate that I'm an economist and I did education research. And so when these data started becoming available, I was like a kid in a candy store. And because I knew the folks that were involved in collecting these data, I was simply able to get confidentiality agreements, and my university signed, and the different state agencies that were involved each had to sign these MOUs or MOAs. But what happened is the data, as you saw from that spreadsheet or from the graph that Jessica showed, the different agencies decided that rather than each agency collecting data, they would collaborate on the collection, and this collaboration was the foundation of what's now Kentucky Stats. But as I was working with these, it was literally initially just for my fun and as an academic, and then I started doing some of the work for academic purposes. It was very clear that it had a lot of policy implications, and so the state became very involved and interested in what I was doing, and so that's why we became more and more formal as we progressed. Now, what we have done is we've just continued that formality, and we are at a point now where we are looking not just at K-12, but as Dr. Garolia will tell you, we're looking at post-secondary education, we're looking at workforce development types outcomes, and this year we feel really fortunate because we now have hired 2 postdocs to work jointly with Kentucky Stats and the University of Kentucky. So Raj, if you want to take over.
Thanks, Gina. So I don't have as long of an experience with the state of Kentucky, as Gina does certainly, but I've worked now with the Kentucky Stats folks for a few years and have worked with state administrative data in a prior state as well. What I wanted to do today was just talk briefly about an example, I'll call it a research project or research agenda about post-secondary attainment and the returns and values of higher education credentials. So as in many states, Kentucky has a goal of raising the attainment, post-secondary degree and certificate attainment of its populace, and we here call it the 60 by 30 goal. So want everyone to have, or the proportion of Kentuckians to have an advanced or post-secondary degree or certificate to be 60% by the year 2030. Another policy that has gotten a lot of attention recently is something called a work-ready scholarship, and this is enhanced funding that's available for students who have not yet earned an associate's degree or higher and want to study in what we call high-demand workforce areas. So how I came to part of this relationship was really first thinking about the policy problems and context, and then talking with colleagues at the Kentucky Council of Post-Secondary Education and with Jessica's team members, we were able to come up with a number of questions which both have a lot of value to the state but also a lot of value to researchers as well. So I just list here a few things that we'll be working on where state longitudinal data systems I just think are critical. We can ask descriptive questions about state student enrollment and credential patterns. We can also ask cause and effect questions such as what are the costs and benefits of different education pathways. I think one thing that's unique about state administrative data in this way is just really the scale is helpful. You know, we can access potentially all students who touch the K-12 system or the post-secondary system, at least those that report data, which is the vast majority of those institutions. And because of this, we can overcome a lot of the limitations that are inherent in more broadly dispersed survey data that we've often relied upon in the education space. Now that comes at a cost because often we don't then touch as many contexts. For example, you know, data and outcomes will be restricted to one state, and sometimes we'll have issues, for example, of when students move out of state or out of the system, we have to deal with that. But again, there's a lot of advantages that these data systems bring in. I feel very fortunate here in the state of Kentucky when Jessica showed that initial slide about the number of kind of agencies and data systems that are running through her office. That's actually somewhat unique across the country. In a lot of states, there are a few agencies that will merge together data, but in this case, there's just a lot more opportunity in some ways because we're bringing from so many different domains. And even though I assume most of the people on this call are interested in educational outcomes, we also know that it really expands beyond our traditional education domain. So I think that's a lot of value with that. I'll just finish up by saying that I think these are also provide a lot of really great opportunities. As a policy scholar, it's really important to me to be able to talk with decision makers, talk with state agency folks, talk with folks at Jessica's team who's working directly with the data. And so these partnerships, and I really do want to stress the partnership piece of things, are really great, both again for the research, but for also the policy application.
Great, thank you. So I've seen some of the messages in the chat. So if you would like to visit our website, it's kystats.ky.gov. And here's my contact information. And if you have any questions from my colleagues, I can pass along that information and questions and connect you to them as well. With that being said, I think we're out of time, and I will pass it off to our peers at Tennessee.
Great. Thanks, everyone. My name is Kevin Schaff. I'm the Director of Research here at the Tennessee Department of Education, and I'm joined today by our partner, Matt Ron at the University of Michigan. I've been the director here for about a year and been at the department for about 3 years. So what we're going to do for these few minutes that we have is take kind of an opposite approach of we're going to share with you the example of a few key examples that we've worked with the University of Michigan on some exciting research initiatives, and then step back from those examples to talk about the process and how it's worked. So in Tennessee, we are focused on these 3 key priorities, and I think you'll see these reflected in the work we do. But we try to make sure that all of our research and all of the work we're doing is aligned to our priorities. And what we'll focus on here is some work that is focused on the educator's priority of really setting a path so that we're developing excellent educators throughout the state. So again, we're going to focus here on some examples of work that we've done with the University of Michigan, and then step back and look at some of the lessons we've learned and look at our process. So starting with our partnership with the University of Michigan, one of the things that this SLDS system has allowed us to do is really take a long-term approach to our partnership. We began partnering with Matt and his team at the University of Michigan back in 2013, so well before I was here and even before the 2015 SLDS grant. And through that grant, we've really been able to develop an iterative process that has played the research off of the policy and helped us get better research questions and help us design policies based on the research findings. So this particular example that we're going to be talking through is focused on educator preparation. So the 2015 IES grant, we had 2 parts to it, and one half of it was focused on educator preparation and educator talent management. Through that work, we focused on research that was using historical data to identify program preparation features, and then from that we started to focus in on clinical preparation in particular, the work that teachers are doing in the classroom with their cooperating teachers or clinical mentors. From that research, we designed a series of initiatives to leverage the features that we found to be important, and we'll talk about a few of those in a moment. The other thing I think that's key to highlight here is that this research was connected to policy and real structural improvements for Tennessee educators. So we focused in on policies around how do we align our preparation to the classroom, to the needs of the classroom. So we've done some work on a landscape analysis of what's happening in educator preparation programs across the state. In policy, we've done some work on partnering educator preparation programs with districts and with their district's HR departments in particular. And then we also developed a tool for educator preparation programs, the annual reports that are delivered through TN Atlas, basically providing that data that we are developing through the SLDS system to the users so that educator preparation programs and the districts will have better access to data about what's working, what aspects are working at each program, and which aspects they may need to grow. And again, all of that is focused on improved human capital decision making and then improved preparation, placement, and retention of educators in Tennessee. To go into a little bit more detail, the work that came out of the analyses we did on the annual reports, we're focused in on what is the evidence for what's working and what's not. So I've highlighted here 3 key studies that Matt and his team led. So I'm going to turn this over to Matt a little bit to give some of the detail on how we developed these questions and how one question led to the next.
Yeah, so really what happened is when we became interested in trying to understand features of preparation that make a difference in the state, one of the many features we looked at was the effectiveness of clinical mentors, specifically their instructional effectiveness as measured by observation ratings in the state and TVOS scores, which are value-added to student achievement measures. The first order question we wanted to know is whether or not pre-service teachers are themselves more instructionally effective early in their first years of teaching when they learn to teach with more instructionally effective clinical mentors. We found that to be the case, that there was a relationship between a mentor's observation ratings and her or his or their observation ratings of the student teachers. We then went on to wonder whether or not there was some concern about whether clinical mentors did worse in years that they served as clinical mentors. So did their evaluation scores actually get harmed? There was some concern in the state among educators about that. We found that in fact that wasn't the case, and if anything, mentors did somewhat better on observation ratings in the years that they served. This led us to do a couple of other studies. One of them was a study that we call ISTE, which asks what are the impacts on candidates when we use evaluation data to identify the most promising mentor teachers in placement schools. And we found that candidates in more promising placements received better coaching and felt more prepared to teach.
Thanks, Matt. So basically, what we wanted to do in setting up these examples is really give you a sense of how each study we did built on the one before and helped set us up for the ones in the future. So from those studies that Matt just identified, we have developed two initiatives that we are that we are conducting right now, and that we've actually this first one, the Mentors Matter Training Initiative. As you can see, it focuses in on the importance of mentors, of clinical mentors. And this one is an initiative providing training targeted in a specific area of modeling effective instruction and targeting that training towards improving questioning and then improving the provision of actionable, meaningful feedback. And the work on that really came from the idea that we had noted that the training that mentors received was uneven, was typically rather superficial, and oftentimes mentors didn't receive any training. Combined with the evidence that Matt mentioned before about how important clinical mentors are in impacting early career teachers' outcomes. So from that, we looked at, what is the evidence base around coaching? How can we develop a training for these mentors that will help improve their coaching ability and help improve the impacts they're having on candidates. One other thing I want to highlight here with this work is that we're now engaged in the fourth iteration of this training initiative. So because of the long-term partnership we have, we're able to iterate not only from one study to the next, but also even within a study to try to refine it and make that study more and more effective. The other part of this Mentors Matter work is the recruitment initiative. So as we're focusing on one arm on how do we improve the training, the support we're giving to the clinical mentors, at the same time we wanted to focus in on who do we select as clinical mentors? Are we picking the right people? So this is building right out of the ISTE initiative that Matt just spoke of, where we looked at promising placements and how do we assign mentors to, candidates to the most promising placement. This initiative built from that and saw that the evidence suggested that the teachers themselves were the key indicator of effectiveness, not so much the schools, but the teachers were even more important. So we looked at how do we use our evaluation data, use that longitudinal data system to identify which teachers are most likely to be effective as mentors, which ones are the most instructionally effective teachers, and then provided recommendation lists, a very small nudge, a very light lift to the districts and to those placement coordinators to just say, here's a recommended list of clinical mentors you should pick and find out, does that improve the quality of the pool of people serving as clinical mentors? And initially, we're finding really promising results that it is having that impact. And then, of course, we're going to look long-term to determine are there differences in the outcomes for those teacher candidates and for the students that they teach? So again, looking at these examples, you can see that the value of the work we've done is really based a lot on the fact that we've had this sustained partnership. It's allowed us to do investigations that go deeper into addressing policy needs. It's allowed us to apply research to changing policies. And it's has been important for us to do that we've been able to have this long-term relationship where we are engaging across roles. So researchers have been helping us design training. At the same time, we've been having input into the research questions being asked, and that kind of back and forth has really, I think, strengthened the work in all ways. Another thing we wanted to highlight here is that one of the key things has been just taking the time to set up operating mechanisms that help us work together. So we have weekly check-ins, Matt and I do. We have had the space, as I mentioned before, to iterate multiple rounds of the same initiative. We've had opportunities to explore what are the next new ideas that we should test out. We've had lots of great new ideas that we haven't tested yet, that we haven't been able to implement, but we've also had the opportunity to see which ones are practical and which ones can be explored more. Highlighted there at the bottom a little bit about some of our next steps. We're thinking what are still the gaps that exist, and how can we improve the training so that we make it virtual and make it accessible to people across more of the state, especially now in this remote learning environment. And then also, if you look closely at those elements of our training program, we've addressed a lot of elements of mentor training, but we haven't addressed issues of equity or diversity, either in the recruitment initiative of who's serving or in how we're training teachers. So those are things that we want to look at and add to and really strengthen the supports we're providing and our approach to recruiting clinical mentors. And the last things we wanted to talk about here are just stepping back. What is our process? How do we get to those particular, what we feel are really high leverage examples? So we have a research review committee within the department that looks at all proposals. You see just a highlight of some of the, it might be hard to see, but some of the things that we're looking for in every proposal. And then we also have a connection to the Tennessee Education Research Alliance, headquartered at Vanderbilt. As you know, we have partnerships with University of Michigan, with many other universities across the country, but we've been centralizing those and trying to structure that access to data through the Tennessee Education Research Alliance. That's helping us to streamline our work. It's helping us to make data transfers more seamless and easier to deal with from a capacity standpoint. So we're not sharing data with multiple partners, but rather just through TARA, and they're taking care of that. And it also allows us to, take advantage of the connections and collaborative networks that they have. And then I wanted to highlight a couple of the details, the nitty-gritty about our data sharing. So the fact is that in these long-term partnerships, we also run into problems. We also run into things that take some time to figure out. So we've had some really nuts and bolts kind of discussions around how are we going to define how we're storing and transferring data. So making sure that the location of all copies of the data must be carefully tracked, and we're going to monitor database access logs. We've had specific long-term, like in terms of weeks, problems over how do we get these agreements to be something that can work for both the university and for the department. And I just wanted to highlight this because as a way of just showing that the work that we're doing here involves both the exciting and policy making, impact, but also there's a lot of behind the scenes that takes time and crossing all the T's. The last thing I wanted to highlight here is that the data we have is in the process of improving. So we right now are focusing, most of the work that we just highlighted here with University of Michigan is based on our longitudinal data system that we're really transitioning kind of away from, where now we have a new SLDS FY19 grant to focus in on our P20 Connect data system that includes data from a variety of agencies across the state, Tennessee Board of Regents, Tennessee Higher Ed, and Department of Human Services, and then we're also going to be bringing in Department of Corrections data. So we are working to improve that system to bring in more data and to improve the automate the data sharing in that system. And our hope there is corrections data. So here, oh sorry, I'm echoing a little bit on my end, but basically I think I just want to end by saying that this is an exciting time because we can already see the impact of these long-term partnerships and of being able to leverage our longitudinal data system. We can also see a vision for how to improve that by taking advantage of data across many agencies to gain even more insight into how to improve education. So with that, I want to turn it over to our next group. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin and Matthew and everybody else. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about the research and evaluation partnership we have here in Wisconsin. My name is Carl Fredrik, and I'm a research analyst at the department, and I'm here with one of our research partners, Eric Grodsky, who's a professor and researcher at the University of Madison. It's been fun to see how these three presentations have tackled the issue of answering this question, and I like that they're kind of complementary. The focus of our presentation is going to be kind of on the partnership per se and how we've developed and maintained that over time. First, a little bit of quick background. I won't go into too much detail because a lot of it has been covered. We've been lucky enough to be the recipients in Wisconsin of 4 SLDS grants, including the most recent 2019 round. The other key that we've been lucky enough to have is a commitment from our legislature to fund our data system. So we've been fortunate across the country, both grant money and a steady stream of state funding coming in to build out our data system and the dashboarding, the other reporting capabilities that we've developed. It started, as many of these did, out of a need for consistent mandated reporting for accountability's sake, but really we moved to a point where the focus, and it's evolved to focus on continuous improvement processes, and this is really where we see research fitting into the whole cycle, right? Part of that continuous improvement process is finding evidence-based practices to use. And so this is where we're really trying to leverage our research partners at the university. Just a quick overview. We have kind of typical data about students, and we're integrating staff data into our statewide longitudinal data system. And unlike Kentucky and the plans it sounds like Tennessee is having, we've decided on a federated data model where we don't pool all the data together into one place, but they're able to be linked on a project-specific basis. So that's just another one of our one of the unique things. It makes it a little harder, but everybody's more comfortable with the privacy protections that this sort of system involves. So you can see that our data is readily linkable to both the University of Wisconsin system and the technical college system here in Wisconsin, as well as currently 2 other agencies, the Department of Children, Families, and Health Services, via our Early Childhood Integrated Data System. So now to the meat of what we really want to talk about is our partnership. You can't quite see it there, but we put in a little Google map showing that one of the keys to the partnership is proximity. It is just a nice half-hour walk that you can take at lunch from the Capitol down to the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. It's a half hour to drive as well if you're including parking. But the proximity isn't enough, and it's really helped that we have a shared sense of mission around education equity. And I just wanted to bring in Eric, our research partner, for him to talk about what was attractive about this sort of partnership from his point of view. Perhaps, if he's unmuted. Okay, well, Eric, feel free to jump in later. The key, so there we have the Wisconsin idea here in Wisconsin that, right, the university should work to better the lives of the people of Wisconsin. And one of the key issues we have in Wisconsin is equity in education. We generally perform well on average, but we have large achievement gaps and attainment gaps by race and economic status and so disability status and everything else. So equity is a real foundation that we're fortunate enough that our friends at WCER, the Wisconsin Center for Education Research, and other research institutions on campus at the University of Wisconsin share. And so that shared sense of values is really what drives our partnership. Much like Tennessee, we really have, and other places, Kentucky, we've tried to leverage our, especially the 2015 and 2019 SLDS grants to promote collaboration. And we've done this, you may have noticed that I snuck the word evaluation into the title of the presentation here, because we've really tried to unify as a department how we approach research and evaluation in this continuous improvement process to try to improve outcomes for students. And so with these grants, we've brought in the top two logos you see there are research centers within the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. And the bottom one there, it happens to be at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, another evaluation group that has done work for the department. And we wanted, what we've done and how we've really sustained the partnership is, yes, we have these grants, but we all know that you can't count on those for sustainability because times change and grants are not always there. So we've actually begun working across divisions in the department to braid some funding that we have for evaluation and research together. This has really helped internally, forcing us across divisions to coordinate and prioritize what we want our research partners to work on. And it's also helped because it allows for an opportunity for shared governance of the research process, right? We come up with a research agenda, but there's some negotiation about, we find what's mutually beneficial for both groups, the department and the researchers. So a little more about our research process. We update our research agenda and publish it on our website every 2 years based on agency priorities. And we encourage research using our data because every time we update the research agenda, there's many more projects than we have capacity to deal with. So there's a real need there's an appetite for research at the department. Similar to other states, requests come in via our website and are reviewed monthly based on criteria that you see there. And then if they're approved, they require a data use agreement, and we work on distributing the data to our partners. Lessons learned, the key, kind of comes back to the question of what makes a good partnership. It really is a personal relationship thing. I think the most successful partnerships we've had have been these long-term ones where, you know, you work on your clear communication and have shared goals, and it's like any relationship. It requires work and purposeful effort to maintain. One thing we've tried to do is focus on mutual long-term benefits where, you know, if maybe, you know, one side will do something with no short-term gain for them, but because, you know, we know that we're both committed to the process, or all sides are committed, and we'll get something later on, you know, just kind of human nature stuff. As for our future plans, we've done a good so far on the personal side of things, but now we're trying to work to institutionalize it because, as everyone knows, people come and go, and we don't want a key person to leave and just set back all the momentum that we've gained so far. So we're trying to institutionalize this process in kind of an umbrella master data use agreement, or MOU, with the between the department and WCER, and we've written in the collaborative planning processes that I talked about earlier into the agreement so that it gives that sort of force of a legal document mandating that happens every once in a while. We're also, like Tennessee, looks like we're exploring ways to try to automate and ease the logistics of data sharing. Nothing can get around kind of the review process and the content review, but any way we can streamline the getting data from here to there and maintaining proper access and security is a win for researchers and for, you know, maintaining student privacy. And finally, you know, we just continue to work on communication, relationship building. It's getting more rare to go into meetings with researchers and learn about stuff that another program area is already doing with them. So we're getting better both communicating internally and across our research partners. And that, I guess, now we are open for question and answers. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Carl and Eric. I see that you have a little phone by you, but sorry we weren't able to hear directly from you. Also want to give a huge thank you to our other panelists, Kevin and Matt, and to Gina, Rajiv, and Jessica. I'm sure our audience benefited from the insights you provided about how your partnerships work and the value that they are bringing to your organization and actually to the entire education community. So now we have some time to review your questions from our webinar audience. Remember to enter them into the Q&A panel on your screen. If we do run out of time to respond on the webinar, we will provide a written response. So in looking at the questions, I see the first one was specific for Kentucky, but if others have a response, that would be great. But we're wondering, are data sets available for various variables outside of Kentucky? So Jessica, do you have a response for that initially? And Jessica, you'll need to come off mute if you're talking. All right, there's Jessica.
I'm off mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Really we're starting to work on some of those out-of-state outcomes through the Coleridge Initiative and kind of investigating how we can integrate data across state lines. But currently, there are not data sets readily available with data from states other than just Kentucky.
All righty. Any other responses to that question from our other states? Kevin or Carl?
I will jump in. This is Carl from Wisconsin. We have worked with, I mean, these are not the only external researchers we work for, but I mean, the main thing is it always works better if you do have some sort of, at least talks beforehand before we get a data request cold to kind of figure out why what you want to do, and what kind of, just get to know you a little bit. But ultimately, it does come down to that alignment with the research needs that we currently have. That it goes a long way to determining who we share data with.
Great, thank you, Carl.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and move to our next question, asking for information on the impact of the mentoring programs on student performance, and that would be for our Kentucky folks, I think, Kevin and Matt.
Yeah, I think you mean the Tennessee folks. This is Matt. As far as the...
I'm sorry, I sure did.
Okay. I just want to make sure I should be speaking. I'm assuming yes. The mentoring program, so for the Mentors Matter training program, the initiative where we are conducting professional development for clinical mentors. Currently, we don't have outcomes data on the impact for the teacher candidates who worked with those mentors. If it actually takes a year and a half after the training to get our first observation, because the pre-service student teachers who worked with those clinical mentors have to graduate, get a job, work for a year, receive their evaluations, and that takes a while to get processed before we can get access to those data. So that will happen downstream at some point. We did conduct post-student teaching surveys of all the teacher candidates and their mentor teachers, and so we've analyzed those data. We have seen impact on self-reported outcomes, both in terms of how the pre-service teachers and the assigned to mentors who received the training report more and better quality mentoring. And in the Mentors Matter recruitment initiative, we're finding that pre-service teachers assigned to mentors in the treatment condition actually feel better prepared to teach. But whether or not that translates into better first-year evaluation scores, we'll hopefully know soon.
Thank you, Matt. Our next question is a great one. How are these partnerships funded? Do states run into challenges with competitive procurement laws, limiting their ability to form partnerships that involve an exchange of funds? So Jessica, can you start off with a response to this?
Sure. So funding is definitely a challenge, and we've been fortunate to secure some competitive grants through IES and some other venues over time. We're currently actually received additional state funding this year. So I think that it really just depends on the state. Everybody has a different funding situation, whether their state fully funds their SLDS now or not, and how much that amount is. But we do continue to write and try to secure competitive grants, and then also we operate on a cost recovery model for any evaluations or research that we do through outside partners.
Thank you, Jessica. Kevin, do you have anything to add for that? Or Carl?
Yeah, this is Kevin. I would just echo most of that. I think that we've explored IES funding. We have looked at other opportunities. I think one of the things that we've been fortunate to be able to do is set up partnerships with people that we can then start to explore what are the most impactful and highest priority projects that we want to explore, and where could we find funding for those. So this kind of ties into the next question I saw as well about how it works in terms of who is the PI and who's the co-PI. In our experience, many experiences, the university partner has been the PI, with the state simply being a co-PI or getting funds through those. But it has actually, in different scenarios, has worked in both directions for us.
Thank you. Carl?
No,
anything to add?
for those times between grants, it also helps to try to get creative on how to sustain at least the relationship, if not the actual work. You know, working with grad students on internships or something is another. So you got to try to be creative where you can from the state agency point of view, because we don't want to lose the attention that we've gotten from our research partners.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, thank you for this information. I will say our states did a great job. They had a limited amount of time and got a lot of information in. But for those that mentioned adding teacher staff data to the SLDS, how are you accounting for so much variability of teachers' backgrounds, settings, et cetera? Carl, do you have a response to that?
I think I was the one that mentioned that. I think that's that's a salient question that we face with our students too. You know, I don't think there's a great answer, except we try. So it's a balance that we try to do as a state agency to only collect what we need to collect, but collect everything that we need to collect. We don't want to overburden districts or teachers or students. But so it's just it's a tightrope that we try to balance.
Thank you. Any other responses to that question before we move on? Okay, we have a question from Indiana. Are the variables for measurement standardized within the SLDS? In short, do they privilege particular areas of inquiry? That may be for our researchers. Does anyone have a response? Okay, well, we'll think about that one and give a written response to that. I'll go ahead and move to the next question so we can get maybe one more question in. Is there a listing of the data repositories for every state? I'm trying to see if there are data sets for Washington State. That's a great question. I do know you can go to the state's websites. I don't know if there's just one listing. Nancy, do you happen to know the answer to that? Is there one place folks can go?
I don't think so. I mean, the states usually have a data dictionary for what's in their SLDS systems, but states are also pulling data from other places, other agencies that may not be fully integrated with the SLDS. So I think you'd have to look at the state. Another option would be to see if the state has done any mapping in the Common Education Data Standards, which I think we're going to talk about on our collaboration slide, I hope. That is a place where some states have actually done some data mappings of their data elements to the data standards that have been developed by stakeholders across the country. And that would give you a sense of what the variables are and what the option sets look like. But not all states have done that. But it's a place to start if you're trying to figure out what states have.
And Nancy, with that, I'll go ahead and we don't have a slide for Common Education Data Standards, but if you wanted to share about that just a bit, I think we'll then go into our contacts and resources. So if you want to mention anything else about CEDS, I'm sorry for that.
No, I should have thought of this sooner because it's a good resource. For those of you who don't know what Common Education Data Standards or CEDS is, it's a voluntary data standards effort that was facilitated by the Department of Education, supported with ed funds, but really crafted by people from across the country, including folks, practitioners in the field, state folks, other standards bodies. And the goal was basically, if you're building a P20W SLDS, what should be in it? So the stakeholders basically have come up with a data dictionary, if you will, for an SLDS, and states have been mapping their systems to CEDS to see how their states' systems align with what we think, could be in SLDS. CEDS also has a bunch of tools that could really be beneficial as researchers are trying to figure out what sorts of questions states want to answer, or if researchers want to put their questions in CEDS, there's a way where you could list your question and then identify all of the variables that you might use to answer that question, as well as include a sample analysis team so that you could share your research with states, with the public, with other researchers as a way to, again, further this national public shared conversation about what folks are doing with data. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Kathy.
You bet. Thank you so much. And I apologize. We do have a number of more questions, but as I mentioned at the beginning, we will provide written responses to all of these, and we'll also provide the links that Nancy talked about regarding common education data standards. On this slide, we do have links to a number of SLDS resources, as well as the forum resources for working with researchers, and then the AERA link for the National Science Foundation Grant Program. And then on the next slide, we have some resources from each of the states that shared with us today and some of their resources. You will be able to access all of these links when the recording and the PowerPoint is made available. This slide has contact information for all of today's presenters, and you can certainly use this if you'd like to dig a little deeper regarding some of what you've heard today. And we've also included some links if you'd like to learn more about the SLDS program and the state support team. So finally, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We are at time. Remember that the webinar recording will be available to you along with the PowerPoint slide deck, and then the questions that we do answer, give written answers for, we will post those on the PowerPoint slides as well. And that'll be available at the SLDS Communities 360 website and the AERA website. Again, a huge thank you to Nancy Sharkey and Felice Levine and the SLDS AERA partnership that brought you today's webinar. And thanks so much to our state presenters from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Wisconsin and their research partners. We so much appreciate all of you joining our webinar today, and I hope you all have a safe and fun Independence Day. Thank you.